For more news, do log on to our website at www.ktnnews.com. But for now, it is time for our newsroom conversation. We're holding the media accountable. What do you think of some of the top stories that the media has covered this week and the manner in which they covered them? And in studio for this conversation, we have Dr. Clayton Peel to my immediate right, who is the Professor of Communications Ethics at the Daystar University. Many thanks for joining us on Morning Express. Here's also previously the deputy editor of the Chronicle newspaper in Zimbabwe, I believe, and many things. That will experience that will come in handy in this conversation. We also have Koki Ochieng, who is a lecturer of media and communications at USIU, and last but not least, journalist and news editor Eric Latif. Many thanks for joining us in studio, ladies and gentlemen. So let's begin with a look at some of the top stories making headlines in the country, and we begin with the most recent. Making headlines on the dailies today is Matters Education. We also have members of parliament who are now being put on the spotlight for devising new ways to increase their salaries. And this has been a long week in terms of talking about the economy in the country. On Sunday, we had a headline of the hefty send-off that Uhuru Kenyatta, or the hefty gratuity that President Uhuru Kenyatta, his cabinet and legislators have gone home with at the end of their 5-year term. And many say it is a bit too much. About 23 billion shillings has gone to paying the president and his cabinet alone in the past 5 years. Let me begin with you, Eric. In terms of media coverage on these reports, in terms of legislators seemingly manipulating the Constitution only when it benefits them, has the media highlighted this as it should?
To some extent, we could say yes, but also to the other extent, I think it always calls on reporters to actually go and deeper and start questioning further. So, for instance, when you say that MPs or leaders have crafted new ways of getting some money into their pockets, what are the rules that what are the routes that are using to get this money? If we talk about gratuity, is it something that was provided before? Is it something that's new? Is it something that we should have looked at earlier? For instance, if we talk about after 5 years, these leaders are now taking away this money, and it comes out like it's a new thing. Was it there before? Was it actually a provision that was there as they were serving? Did we fail to talk about it then? And now raise it now like it's it's an emergency,
right.
Or is it something that's completely new? I think that those are the areas that probably we should be looking at and saying, did we have a build-up to this story? So now we are saying, oh, like we've been saying, there was a provision that they're going to take home X amount of shillings because of serving for this long, and it's actually now happening. It's just an execution of what was expected. Or are we saying that before they left, they made sure that on the last day of work, they included this this clause, and now this is what's happening. So what's the background of this? I guess that's where the main part for me would be, to understand where the background is and where this story is coming from.
Right. Koki, have we created this background right? I remember just before the August 8th elections, we already had the SRC proposing to slash salaries and allowances of some of the members of parliament, and we saw many of them coming out and saying, I cannot earn 600,000 shillings. That will reduce me to living like a beggar. And many of us said, well, this will probably be the first order of business when some of them are elected, and now we're seeing it. But has the media built that background correctly for the citizen?
I think the media should question what the SRC has been doing for the last 5 years, its effectiveness, because, again, it's supposed to be an independent body that makes decisions on how much people should earn at a given time. The second question the media should ask is, how is it that you're employed by the taxpayer and you make a decision on how much the taxpayer should pay you oftenly? So what are the HR loops there? What is the Public Service Commission doing to make sure that they put in policies or put in regulations about the MPs as employments. What is their term of reference, and why is it that they have that leeway to debate their salaries? Imagine if we all had that leeway to debate our salaries at a workplace, then I don't think anything would work.
An issue demands
exactly,
with it.
exactly. So I think the stories is more like Eric says, that yes, you look into, is this something that was there previously, which I think there was always a package to be given, but what we can question is the sustainability and probably the amounts.
Right.
And again, what is the alternative? Is there the story of the MP after? And therefore, what would be some of the reasons why they would need that money thereafter? I've seen some stories like that, because why aren't they able to sustain themselves during the period of engagement and then wait for this hefty payment? Is there an alternative way they can be compensated without them feeling the need to always fight to keep their monies at a certain level?
All right, so you take us back in the background to begin with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission.
Yes.
And what it's done for the past 5 or 6 years with its term ending now. Dr. Peel, I don't know how conversant you are with the working of the SRC, but just about towards the end of last year, I believe, they had a job evaluation process, and many Kenyans thought that that would then lead to a decline or, a decrease in the public wage bill. I mean, we saw allowances being slashed, but to our surprise, Sarah Serem herself, the chairperson of the commission, says that when they came into office, the public wage bill was about 425 million shillings. As they're leaving, it might just skyrocket to 650 billion shillings. I mean, and that's about 250 billion shillings more than where they found it. In terms of probing what this commission has been doing over the past 5 years, have we put out that information for even Kenyans to know what the mandate of this commission is?
I think that's a very good question. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission was set up by the Constitution precisely to ensure that there are no excesses and that the politicians don't award themselves these gratuities. And so I think what the media needs to do is to inform people of the constitutional obligations of the SRC and then put the SRC on their defense. To what extent are they upholding the terms of their office as dictated by the spirit and letter of the Constitution?
All right. And
probably what are the inconsistencies? Because the Constitution might say one thing, and then the other, the employment terms might say another, and therefore they might be justified actually to ask for that amount.
Right.
So where is the story? The story is what is the inconsistency, what has been done, what has been effective or not, because I remember there was a time that there was a pay cut for, was it a pay cut for the president and the vice?
Yes.
The voluntary pay cut.
So what was the impact of that pay cut? And where did that money go, and what did it supplement?
Right.
So those are the questions probably we should be asking.
Was it even effected? In the first place, we don't know. We don't know whether the president actually takes less, like he pledged that he would like to take less. Does he actually get paid less from by his employer?
Right.
Does he accept less, or does he receive the full amount and then donate the other, the amount that he said he'd take less?
And of course, this was all meant to trickle down all the way to members of county assembly, and the fact that we haven't seen them complain yet.
And it did not actually
would raise
go.
questions as to whether it was actually implemented. All right, so some of the stories that journalists need to better probe in terms of matters economy in the country. Let's focus now.
And maybe one more thing. Why is it in billions?
Right.
Is it the number of people serving? And if it is the numbers, what is the capacity? Is there duplication? And why do we have duplication in the system? Those are the questions that you must ask. If it was 400 million and it goes to some billions, why? That's a question.
All right. And of course, Sarah Serem saying that because the perception in many Kenyans is that public state officers are to account for the ballooning wage bill, but we've seen some reforms there by SRC, but they're now coming out to say it wasn't really the public, state officers really, but also the civil, civil service, which has a lot of ghost workers, a lot of, a very high number of workers as well. So it is something that definitely needs to be probed. But talking of things that need to be probed, matters education have also come come to the forefront in the past 2 weeks. We've just come from, I believe, is it 10 years now of free primary school education. In terms of really outlining the gains the country has made for free primary education, Latif, what do Kenyans know from the media?
It's actually 14 years of free primary education since 2003 when Kibaki came in. There have been a lot of things. I guess you can talk about people going to school and not paying for tuition. But then when you go and you're, for example, in boarding schools, and you have to pay for all these other levies and that come up. However, you know, when many people are talking about education, and especially like primary education and secondary education, and the reporters and the people who read, consume a lot of this media, we talk from where we come from. And where we come from is that many of our people are not using public education, public schools. So when you talk about free education, people will tell you, what free education? I don't know free education because I'm still paying school fees to some private school. But if you actually went into the public schools, is there free education? Yes, it's there. However, to what extent and what are the impacts of that? We've had the National Union of Teachers raising issues over the past and other education stakeholders saying, yes, there's free primary education, but then there are other costs that come with it. Schools, school boards are having to hire extra teachers because we don't have enough teachers. And therefore, as you come in, you have to pay something for that. However, to a greater extent, obviously, there has been an issue of free education. Now, even if we go into secondary education and you talk about free tuition for day school, which has been implemented in some instances, and now we are talking about full, proper free education, the questions that we need to do is actually go in and interrogate in public schools and make it very clear. We are talking about public schools. When you're gauging it from where you sit, and where you sit is private education, then you will not feel the impact of free education. But if you actually went and spoke to those people who seek public education system, then they'll tell you the impact of
that there is free education. But the critics, Koki, would say that we need to call it subsidized education as opposed to free education. And many have also accused the media of always, following the tune of politicians and whoever is speaking. So, of course, politicians have been promising free secondary school education. And as soon as they say it begins in January, the media says there's going to be free secondary school education in January. But some of the wordings that we're using, free secondary school, would make any parent of a boarding school student think they will be paying nothing in January this year. So in terms of the wordings and also articulating the provisions of this free secondary school education, have we done a right job in informing the citizen?
First and foremost, Kenya has been lauded to have achieved that Millennium Development Goal, and we knew the challenges of implementation, and we knew a lot about the corruption around that particular endeavor. So again, we would probably just look at it as an achievement, but then again, we would need to question why is there a stronger private schooling system than there is a public schooling system? That's the main question. Some of us went to public school, and the benefits were as good as any.
Right.
So therefore, why isn't probably the government looking inwards to strengthen public schooling to the extent that now parents see the benefits of paying whatever it is to top up the subsidized fees, and therefore, thriving, making the area, flourish better. I'm also going to challenge the issue about teachers being employed by boards, and yet we have a very strong teacher employment body, the TSC. What are the challenges that the TSC is facing, and why then does a school have to take the mandate to employ teachers? What is going on in that profession that should be questioned, and probably the employment? And when they talk about devolution, is there a way that probably it has not taken care of making sure that they employ teachers and supply them according to the requirements?
Right. Dr. Peel, very briefly, before we take a break, you're a professor of communication ethics. Again, in terms of that communication, because headlines, usually, there are people who don't read the story. They read the headlines and they go with it. Ethically, some of the headlines that we've been putting, especially in terms of education, free secondary education to begin in January, is that ethically correct as the media?
Very much not. We need to interrogate the rhetoric, especially in a protracted election season that we've had.
Right.
A lot of promises have been made. And it is our job as journalists, and I still consider myself a journalist, it is our role to interrogate the rhetoric behind the promise that is often made before thousands of adoring supporters. So I think we need to do more.
As a media.
And of course, the manifestos outline. So once you get the manifesto of the political party, it is up to you to interrogate the politicians to give you substance.
Should be clear whether it's free or not.
All right, let's take a short break here on Morning Express. This is the newsroom conversation. We're probing how the media has covered some of the news-making headlines. Take a short commercial break. Do stay with us. When we come back, we'll be interrogating the David and D saga, the manner it was covered, as well as talks of cessation by the opposition.
This is KTN News.
Grab this amazing festive offer. Own your piece of Valley View Greens in the evergreen Rumuruti town for just 99,000 shillings today. Electricity and water available. Site visits every Wednesday and Saturday. Text invest to 33300. PRC. Genuine affordable property.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to Morning Express. It is a newsroom conversation, and the arrest of economist and NASA strategist David Ndii made headlines on Tuesday evening following his arrest in Kwale County, where he was on holiday with his family. And NASA strategist David Ndii was later released on a 10,000 shilling cash bail, with the Directorate of Criminal Investigations requesting for investigations to be completed before any arrests were made. But how did the media handle the coverage of David Ndii's arrest? Well, let's discuss this in more detail in studio. Let's begin with you, Dr. Clayton Peel. In terms of ethics, once again, when this news broke, there wasn't much information surrounding Ndii's arrest. He was all the way in Diani, Kwale County. But news came that he was arrested. He wasn't sure by who, he wasn't sure where he was. But immediately the media decided, well, let's call NASA. I mean, he is a NASA strategist, and NASA told us where he was. And that became the authoritative story by the media, that NASA says this is where David Ndii was. But it wasn't sure. It wasn't made clear whether it was flying squad who had arrested him, whether he had been arrested for any reason connected to his political affiliation as well. At a situation where information is not readily available, what are the ethics there, especially in such a volatile time in the country?
Indeed, the ethics, in theory, require multiple sources. Normally, in journalism school, you'd be told that an authoritative source would be chief police spokesman, perhaps. But what do you do if the police say, well, we don't know?
And that's what they did, actually.
And you have this event, which is an extremely significant event, the arrest is. Do you hold the story? Do you pretend it didn't happen? So there are dual obligations here for the media. One is to do their utmost to get authoritative information. But where it's not forthcoming, if you can establish from credible sources that the man has been arrested, that's news. We are in a 24-hour news cycle. We cannot wait hours until the police spokesman is ready to talk. So it's a dilemma. It's one of those ethical dilemmas where you have to, your news editor, news director has to decide on the spot. Do we do it in the public interest or not?
Right. And we saw that playing out publicly. Koki, in terms of coverage of the entire saga, all the way from Kwale, Diani and Kwale to the DCI, headquarters here in Nairobi. In terms of coverage, again, did we do that right? Because we had a lot of excitement from a press conference by his wife, Mwende Getabaki. We had a press conference by Raila Odinga giving his reaction, and it became very quickly politicized. And many thought that the real issues of freedom of expression were suppressed by the media.
Media, I think, is really about voyeurism. It's made, news a voyage that you want us to follow through. Of course, the story broke out on social media, and of course now media picks up from there. And if, like you say, one source did not avail the correct position, then you follow the sources that will create the drama around the issue. And possibly, maybe the media should interrogate why the drama? What was the necessity of these sources to sensationalize it, if you say, but more or less give their position beforehand? Again, we are asking ourselves questions like, how has the media told us the story of how and when you should be arrested? Why? What are the procedures? Was there a warrant? Who arrests you at a given time? Who is mandated to carry out, all those kind of things? So that becomes a complete story, in the sense that we are now not looking at this particular prominent person as being, intimidated and all that, but we are interrogating how the procedures and processes of the police were followed. And again, we're also interrogating why the various actions or places the person was taken featured. And then, of course, what happens is when one creates that illusion of you know, like a reality show, then it triggers memories of things that probably Kenyans don't need to be reminded as often. So we have to be very careful as the media, yes, to break the story, but take time to investigate it. Because now, in this time and age, anything the media says has an implication, and we don't need to reverberate that as oftenly so. So it's important that the media take time. Yes, we want to be as quick as social media and to be on toes, but the bottom line is we need to make sure that we get the facts right and insist that we get support from those that we need to be our sources.
Right. Latif, David and Dee, I mean, you've read, you've heard it on the radio, you've seen it on the TVs. How would you grade the media in that coverage?
You know, the media played the role that I think was intended to have been played by the people who were orchestrating this whole thing. I think it was just meant to be a public charade from the very beginning.
Right.
And of course, social media and mainstream media took it up, and they did it. Also, the pressure that because it was getting covered and it was receiving live coverage, it also exerted some pressure on some quarters, which may have helped David Ndii in his case. The issue, and it's good we have the academics here with us, it's a story has broken like that. This is a prominent person. And, you know, we received the information that this person has been arrested, and the report is that these people came and they claimed to be flying squad officers, and they said they're taking him to this police station. And when we went there, we didn't find him. And we go on air and say that he has been arrested by a flying squad. So, like even Dr. Pilo was saying, verification of sources and at the same time, the need to tell the story, how do you balance that between saying, it's claimed that he's been arrested, or do you want to go in and say he has been arrested? If you started having all your news stories that there's an allegation that Koki has been arrested, it's been claimed that Dr. Peel is the one who has arrested him, then you start looking like you don't even know what you're saying.
Right.
You look weak, and yet you need to tell this story properly. You need to actually go ahead and say, so-and-so has been arrested. The police are saying they don't know whether they're the ones who have arrested him. You know, the police are saying they don't know, so they are the ones who have arrested him. However, it's claimed that it's flying squad who came and arrested this gentleman. And I think the coverage that we saw, it was, like we said, rolling news. It's happening on the go. The NASA brigade, of course, took it up like they're supposed to take it up, and they milked it dry. However, the police also wasted the opportunity. Because when they're wasting the opportunity to actually come out and say, we have arrested or we are investigating, if you've arrested somebody, just say we've arrested somebody.
Right.
Or we've picked him up for questioning. We've not arrested him. We've just picked him up for questioning. And he'll be released when
And I think that's another story, again, questioning whether it was deliberate for police, because there seemed to be a discord there. Police in Mombasa or the coast saying they're not aware of an arrest. Police here being aware of an arrest. Was it something whether it was planned? Was there no communication with officers there? And then it matters protocol again in arresting somebody who comes from a totally different county. Yes, Dr. Peel, you had something to add.
I wanted to bring a third dimension, and that is in a context where people have been known to be arrested by unknown persons and not found again or found dead. I think the media has an additional role to act as swiftly as is possible with sufficient facts to alert the public of this arrest and to make the necessary inquiries so that one agency or the other takes responsibility. Unfortunately, that is the context we are in, and it may save a life.
All right,
Yeah,
so taking responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's important that now the story, the follow-up story is what are the jurisdiction requirements, or, you know, how has the police organized itself to the extent that, you know, if you're in a certain county, others can override. What are those decisions made and by whom? And of course, then what should be the norm? That should be the story to be told.
Right, I think the bigger question is whom also is this higher orders from above that police always saying when, you know, a lawyer wants to speak to David Ndii, well, we cannot let you in because we have higher orders or waiting for orders from above. You know, Latif.
Yeah, and I think what you've just raised here as well is the issue of police and transforming itself from force to service, and that comes with a bit of openness. We've had those stories before where a certain department of the police goes into a certain area and they conduct an operation, and the local police officers claim they did not know.
I mean, we saw that at Westgate, I believe. Westgate
was one of them. We saw that when there was a raid at some point in Parkland.
Yes.
Was it Westlands in Parkland?
Westlands.
Was it last month? Where one unit of police comes and they're conducting a certain operation, and the local Parklands police station is not aware that this is happening for several reasons. Maybe internally they do not trust each other in terms of this person leaking information to the wrong person. However, how do you operate in such instances as police officers? And I think that forms actually a good story, like Dr. Peel is saying. If somebody is picked up by people who claim to be police officers, that person turns up dead somewhere, right? In a river. And we come back and the police say, we told you we are not the ones who arrested this person. We don't know who arrested this person. And this story sort of dies. And yet, if you actually talk off the cuff with several senior police officers, they'll tell you, yeah, we know about that operation. We need to bring up those issues to the fore. And I think reporting, like it's saying, like, you know, David Nee has been picked up by people claiming to be police officers is something.
I think
and let the police officers come and say, we are not the ones who picked him up, but we have picked up the investigation to find him. If they're not saying, well, we don't know, we are not the ones who picked him up, and he claims that you know. You know who arrested him.
I think maybe we are you know, just being a bit unfair to the police. Maybe they're really struggling with transformation in terms of operations, to know how a service operates and to be the force.
Right.
And maybe they are more comfortable with being the force. We can link it to the kind of integrity tests we had for the police leadership and the kind of decisions they are making. Is it their orientation? Those are some of the stories we might need to interrogate. Is it true that Kenya needs a service or it needs a force? Those are questions that probably we could ask. And if they're a service, then what's the challenge of them, you know, being open about their operations, being clear in terms of what is required, you know, I mean, it's clear, for example, if I'm caught by NTSA, I will pay this fine at this place. So that clarity is important because the public is also, you know, paying attention to institutions like those. And they want people, they want things to be done in a humane manner, clearly following the law. We always talk about rule of law. It has become like a middle name of Kenya, that the rule of law, the rule of law. So when the law enforcers are not following that rule of law, we should interrogate the challenges probably they are facing.
And come out. All right. And just before we move on from this, I understand that Larry Madowo, NTV news anchor, has now been summoned by police over an interview that he had previously with David Ndii touching on matters cessation. And it is, you know, a summon with regard to hosting somebody who had utterances bordering on incitement to violence, the very same reason why David Ndii was arrested according to the charge sheet that was availed to the media. Dr. Peel, there has been a lot of talk of freedom of the media and whether the media is working under duress from state actors themselves, or whether the media cannot express itself fully because of that state control, so to speak. A news anchor has now been summoned to give a statement of an interview that he had. What does this signal in terms of media freedom?
I think it is cause for alarm. If you will remember, the Kenyan media fraternity adopted a code of conduct, which they had been working on since the 90s. In 2007, that became part of an act of parliament, updated in 2013.
Right.
The aim of having a code is to ensure that there's self-regulation. Now, when there are additional pieces of legislation which are used to summon show hosts, talk hosts, that causes great concern. He did not utter those words himself. He's not a soothsayer to know what the guests would have uttered. You have no idea what my next word will be.
Exactly.
And I can assure you I won't get you into trouble.
Thank you.
But here's the thing. I think we now have pieces of legislation which were designed to intimidate the media. And that's unfortunate because in good faith, the media fraternity designed a code of conduct which became part of the law of this country. There are institutions like the Media Council of Kenya and the Communication Authority, and those should be used where there are concerns raised about the conduct of media personnel.
Right.
So it's cause for great concern.
Let me begin with you, Erica, before you seem a bit on edge on this. What impact do you think this would have? Because I think as a news anchor myself or as a host, I'd be thinking, should I really host this person? He would give some very, probably important or credible information, but for fear of this, let me not host him. Is it likely to propagate that?
It's how the police are handling this whole matter. Look, it's all right. If you want an anchor to actually come and tell you this is what this person was talking about, or just to come and sign a statement and say, I can authentify that this is actually a proper clip of what was aired on my show, why don't you just go to the station? From the fact that this man was arrested and transported, I don't know whether in the back of a car or wherever, he was arrested in Kwale. We saw him in Nairobi. Now you tell somebody to come to the station because we'd like you to tell us about this person. How do I know what you're going to do with me next? That's, it's how the police are handling this matter that just is wrong. I think if police are conducting an investigation, and among the things and among the pieces of evidence that they're collecting is what he had said on a public platform, and you want to use that, it's fine. We cannot argue with whatever mode of investigation you're doing. It's how you're doing it. If they wanted, for example, to talk to Larry Madowo, what stops the police from coming to Nation Media Group and saying, we'd like to have to record a statement with Larry, or we'd like to talk to the management of Nation Media Group. We're coming to Nation Media Group. And here we are. It's clear. Call your lawyers. We're coming to the Nation Media Group. Or we'd like... Why summon somebody just to come and... It raises those issues of exactly, you are not clear. Like I said, transparency. The police are not being transparent. If they were transparent, if they had built the trust, then Larry would have actually said, oh, you guys want me to come? Sawa, let me call the Nation Media Group bosses. Let them alert the legal department of Nation Media Group. Let's prepare ourselves. We'll come, we'll record a statement. We leave. That's all. You just want me to tell you whether he came to my show.
Right, okay.
I think that's where the media house and its legal department come in. I think any employee in a given organization, so long as you're representing or you're at work, you're basically carrying out a work duty, you need to have legal coverage from your organization. And therefore, I don't think it is in order for the police to summon an individual who was at the workplace carrying out his agenda. And like Dr. Pil says, you never know what I can say. In the next time, I can probably start chanting solidarity forever. What are you going to do? But the bottom line is, I think it is time for media houses to critically look at the media laws, to strengthen their legal departments, to protect the journalist, not only from violence and trolling and etc., online and offline violence, but also from yes, not from the government, but from any legal issue that might arise.
Powers from above.
No.
Or whatever they are.
I don't want to give it names. It's just legal issues or any issue that is off the tangent as expected at the workplace.
All right. So again, at the end of all this, a lot of questions, stories coming into how the police are doing their job and why they do it the way they do. So quite a few stories there for journalists to explore. Let's focus on one final issue that made headlines, and that is President Uhuru Kenyatta's cabinet. We're still unsure when he will name the nominees, but we are sure he is reconstituting his cabinet. There is a lot of lobbying already going on. There's talk of cabinet slots being extended to 22, up from the current 19. But again, in terms of highlighting what the cabinet has achieved in the past 5 years, what the impact of the 19 slots has been, what the impact of 22 cabinet slots will be, and again also assessing the development record of these cabinet secretaries. Have we seen that from the media as we tell Kenyans, this is what so-and-so achieved and this is why they may be brought back? This is what so-and-so achieved, this is why they may not be brought back. Dr. Peel.
Not enough. I think in this phase where we are anticipating the president's appointments. There should be that form of discussion such that even the president, as the appointing authority himself, is aware what is in the public domain regarding appointments. Regarding the extension of the size of the cabinet, questions should be asked. Will it improve service delivery? Will this be a more efficient cabinet? Are the extra portfolios justified? Will they meet specific needs that perhaps were not met or under-met last time? Or is it a case of jobs for the boys? I think some of these questions should be asked.
All right. And of course, jobs for the boys comes up because a lot of political favors and political rewards must be given after the campaign period. But again, 19 cabinet secretaries, Koki, I don't know if you can name 19 cabinet secretaries or whether Kenyans can name 19 cabinet secretaries. It is at the media's job to, sort of articulate what each ministry is doing.
Thank God we can't name them. That means there are more opportunities for people to take up those positions.
Right.
I remember when I was in primary school, I knew the Minister of Education for so long was one person. So I think it's a good thing that, that the government has that opportunity to elect people or, to select, I don't know that it's select people who might strengthen the government's position. It's only a matter of understanding that now that the Constitution has changed and we are talking more about integrity and performance, then it is in order for the appointing, the president to appoint who he thinks will drive his agenda. Because most of the failures that maybe were attributed to the past 4 years could have been resolved if they had more people who could be innovative and implement things that they put in their manifesto.
Right.
So for me, I think it's just in order. The question is whether you can tabulate as media or you highlight, like you said, what the achievements are and bring out, like what were the weaknesses and what would the 22 ministries do to change the position of the performance of the current government.
Right. And of course, a lot of lobbying is still going on, Latif, in terms of cabinet secretaries. But again, I mean, the likes of, Fred Matiang'i, who've been very vocal and very out there for Kenyans to really see. But the issue of reconstitution of the cabinet also brings in the division with the opposition, which has now said it will not be part of the committees to vet, cabinet secretaries. But then just today, they say they want to be in one or, more than one committee. Have we interrogated again coming out of this, the part of the opposition, whether they're speaking from both sides of their mouths, saying we do not want to be part of this committee, but we will be part of this committee, both of which are under President Uhuru Kenyatta, whom they do not recognize?
I think that there are a couple of stories that come out, and the media can take an opportunity to drive a national agenda. One, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 created a cap for 22 cabinet slots. We actually need to start understanding government. Like Koki is saying, we remember names of personalities. So-and-so was the minister for this and, was a strong man in this region. When you talk about Ukambani, you had Muli Mutisia. You talk about Coast, you had so-and-so. You talk about Mount Kenya, Meru, you had so-and-so. It's actually, we have grown up with knowing personalities rather than government departments and the role of government and the role of cabinet in running a government. We need to start having that conversation. Because if we started having that conversation, then we'd understand if you have 22 ministries maximum, if you created 22 ministries, what does that mean? If you created 77 state departments, what does that mean? Because you may not have more than 22 cabinet ministries, but you can have more than 100 state departments. What does that actually mean? How does that talk about running a government and effectiveness of a government? So that later we'll come back and say, we actually do not need this ministry. If we have this ministry that handles A, B, C, D, then we do not need this. Or this duplicates the role that has been played by this other ministry. We stop talking about individuals, the Matiang'is, the Aden Mohammeds, we stop talking about individuals, we look at ministries. So we can say that this person has actually been appointed to run this ministry, and we all know what he's supposed to be doing.
All right. I think it's a credible story there, especially in the, state departments, because, these are people whose tenure really is not affected or goes beyond political transition, so to speak. So there's a lot of questions there to be asked. But we hope the media will do that. We're out of time on this conversation. Many thanks for joining us for the newsroom. This is Eric Latif, who is a journalist and news editor. We also have Koki Ochieng, who is a lecturer of communications and ethics. Beg your pardon, lecturer of communications, rather, at USIU. And last but not least, Dr. Clayton Peel, who is a professor of communication ethics at the Daystar University. Many thanks for being part of this conversation. I want to take a short commercial break here on Morning Express. Even as we release our viewers watching us on KTN Home, Life and Style is coming up next. But for those on KTN News, when we come back, we're focusing on your health. It's been a difficult year for the Kenyan public health sector. Our Dr. Mercy Korir will be coming up next. What to expect this year in the public health sector. Dr. Mercy, very briefly, what do you expect from you this morning?
We're just taking stock of what has happened in the health sector, and that is the two major strikes that affected the health sector. So we're looking at the lessons we've learned from the Health Act 2017 and moving forward, what is it that we should expect in our health sector? All
right, so that's coming up right after the break. This is Morning Express. Stay with us.